the most feared man in Toronto's financial underworld, hadn't opened a ledger in 8 months. Not because the books were too complicated, because the last man who handed him a ledger had been stealing from him for 2 years, and every number on every page had been a lie. Garvey, his CFO, his right hand, a man who wore beautiful suits and understood compound interest better than most people understood breathing. Garvey had taken $4.3 million across 11 shell accounts, hidden inside false vendor payments, ghost payroll entries, and a depreciation schedule so elaborate it was almost artistic. Rask had found it by accident. A rounding error, of all things, a single decimal point that didn't behave the way he expected. Garvey was no longer a problem. But the numbers were. Because if Garvey could do it for 2 years without Rask noticing, then every ledger was suspect, every balance sheet, every figure put in front of him by his current staff, competent, frightened people who knew better than to steal from Konstantin Rask, might still be wrong. Not from dishonesty, from the cascading damage Garvey had left behind, errors compounding on errors, corrections built on false foundations. He had hired 3 forensic accounting firms since April. He had paid significant fees for significant reports. Each report was 300 pages long and told him absolutely nothing he could trust. The language was too careful. Too hedged, potential discrepancies, areas requiring further review. Professional cover-your-ass language that cost him a great deal of money and told him precisely 0. He was running a syndicate, construction, logistics, import, on instinct and paranoia, signing nothing, approving nothing. His empire was hemorrhaging. Tobias said nothing about it. His underboss had the particular skill of understanding, when silence was more useful than observation, and Rask had given him very little to work with lately. He sat across from Rask in the glass-walled office, above the King Street construction offices, watching Rask hold the same unsigned contract he'd been holding for 40 minutes. "There's a temp in the accounting pool downstairs," Tobias said eventually. Rask didn't look up. She came through Pemberton staffing, placed 3 weeks ago to cover the Garvey fallout. A pause. She's been working late. They all work late. She came in at midnight last Friday, stayed until 6 in the morning. Another pause. Nobody asked her to. Rask set down the unsigned contract. Brynn Ashton had not planned to be there at midnight. She had also not planned to find what she found. The accounting pool at Rask Construction was, charitably, a disaster, not the organized kind of disaster that came from growth or understaffing. This was the particular chaos that results from someone deliberately making things complicated. The previous CFO, she'd been told his name was Garvey, she'd been told nothing else, had built a bookkeeping system that looked impeccable from the outside. Clean categories, color-coded folders, quarterly summaries that balanced to the penny. It was only when you went deeper that you saw it. The way certain vendor codes appeared across too many projects, the depreciation tables that didn't match the physical assets she could cross-reference in the insurance schedules, the payroll entries for crew numbers that didn't reconcile with the site logs she found in a box under someone's desk. Brynn was a temp. She was paid to enter the backlog of invoices into the new system, reconcile the receivables, and not ask questions. She was very bad at not asking questions. She didn't see it as heroism. She saw it as the same compulsion that made her recount her change at the grocery store, even when she was running late. Numbers had rules. When numbers broke their own rules, something was wrong, and wrong things made her teeth itch. She had been a CRA auditor for 6 years. She had seen creative accounting before. She had once unraveled a tax evasion scheme hidden inside a pet food company's import tariffs. She had been thorough, and she had been correct, and she had written a report that her supervisor told her to file away quietly, because the corporation in question had a very good lawyer and some very comfortable relationships with people who were above her pay grade. She had refused to sign off on the quiet filing. She had been shown the door. That was 14 months ago. Her mother's dialysis started 4 months later. Brynn had been working temp contracts since. taking anything that had numbers in it, putting money aside, paying the Humber River Hospital parking fees that added up faster than her overtime. She wasn't supposed to care about Rask Construction's books. She was supposed to do the minimum and collect the paycheck. She pulled the depreciation tables and started over from the top. It was 2:47 in the morning when she found the first clean thread, a legitimate vendor payment from 3 years ago that Garvey had used as a template before he'd started disguising things. She followed it backward. She built a framework on graph paper because she thought better on paper. By 5 in the morning, she had a single page. Not of everything. She didn't have time for everything. Just 1/4, cleaned up. The real picture of what had actually come in and what had actually gone out, with every ghost entry flagged in red. She left it on the office manager Suki's desk with a post-it that said, "Found some anomalies going back to Q3 2022. Happy to walk through." She went home, slept 4 hours, showered, and came back. The page was on Rask's desk by 9 o'clock. Tobias had found it, understood immediately what it was, and brought it upstairs without a word. Rask placed it in front of him and looked at it. 1 page, 12 rows, a column of what Garvey had reported and a column showing the variance, clean, annotated in pencil in small, precise handwriting, no hedging language, no potential discrepancies, just the number, what it should have been, and the difference. The total variance for that single quarter was $847,000. His hand moved before he thought about it. He picked up the page. He was looking for the catch, the asterisk, the footnote, the place where the certainty became conditional. It wasn't there. The numbers did what numbers were supposed to do. They told the truth. He hadn't held a true number in 8 months. He set the page down carefully, as though it might tear. "The temp," Rask said. "Yes." "Bring her up." Brynn was in the middle of reconciling the petty cash accounts. Genuinely petty, nothing suspicious. Just a procurement manager with a weakness for expensive coffee and a creative interpretation of office supplies. When Suki appeared and told her that Mr. Rask wanted to see her. She didn't know who Mr. Rask was. She assumed he was HR. She pulled off her reading glasses, folded them into her breast pocket, and followed Suki to the elevator. The office on the top floor was not an HR office. She understood that immediately. The room was large and deliberately bare. No motivational posters, no family photos. A single painting on the east wall, abstract dark blues and charcoal that looked expensive rather than decorative. The desk was a slab of black walnut the size of a dining table. The man behind it was not what she'd expected. She'd expected someone corporate, the particular uniform of a certain kind of executive, grey suit, careful hair, the kind of expensive watch that signaled success without saying anything specific about how it was earned. Konstantin Rask wore a dark button-down, with the sleeves rolled to his forearms. He was somewhere in his early 40s, with close-cut dark hair going silver at the temples and a face that had been weathered by something that wasn't weather. There was a scar along his jaw that hadn't come from a shaving accident. His eyes were a flat, clear grey that moved over her with the particular calculation of someone who spent a great deal of time deciding what things were worth. He held up her single page. "You made this," he said. "It wasn't a question. I found some anomalies in the Q3 2022 period and—" "Sit down." She sat. "What's your name?" "Brynn Ashton. I'm the temp from Pemberton, placed here for the receivables backlog." "You weren't placed here to do this." He looked at the page again. "No." She folded her hands in her lap. Her heart was doing something quick and unpleasant against her sternum. "I can't leave broken books alone. It's a personality defect. I'm sorry if I overstepped." Something moved in Rask's expression. Not quite a reaction. Just a small adjustment, the way a door shifts slightly in its frame when someone approaches from the other side. 3 accounting firms, he said. 6 months, 300 pages. He set her single page on the desk between them and tapped it once with 2 fingers. 1 page, 1 night. How? Brynn looked at the page. I went back to the source documents, the original vendor files, the old insurance schedules, the physical asset records. The people you hired, they were working from Garvey's numbers to check Garvey's numbers. You can't audit a lie using the lie as your baseline. The silence stretched. Where did you work before Pemberton? Her jaw tightened slightly. Federal Audit Division. You left. I was asked to leave. Why? She met his eyes, the grey ones, flat and calculating and waiting. I wouldn't sign off on something I knew was wrong. Rask was quiet for a long moment. Outside, 18 floors below, King Street moved through its morning in the entirely ordinary way that cities had of continuing, regardless of what happened inside glass towers. I have more books than this, he said. I assumed. They're not all construction. She understood what he meant. She held his gaze and said nothing. I need someone who goes back to the source documents, Rask said, not someone who builds reports on what they're handed. I need someone who can tell me the actual number, not the reported number, the actual number, every time. Brynn thought about her mother's dialysis schedule. She thought about the parking fees at Humber River. She thought about the 6 months of minimum payments she'd been making on her line of credit, while she figured out what came next. She named a number, her actual number, not a modest one. The number she'd calculated 3 weeks ago would close her mother's hospital debt by spring. Rask didn't flinch. He wrote a figure on the notepad in front of him and turned it to face her. It was higher than hers. Weekly, he said, as long as the work is accurate. She looked at the number for a moment. Then she looked at the single page she'd built from midnight to 5 in the morning and left on Suki's desk because she couldn't help herself. It'll be accurate, she said. The first month was numbers. Brynn built her workspace in the accounting pool after hours, when the other staff had gone home and the building was quiet, except for the cleaning crew and the security rotation, both of which learned quickly to leave her alone. She ate vending machine sandwiches at her desk and drank coffee from the Tim Hortons on Adelaide, and didn't think much about the fact that she was working for a man whose real business she was slowly beginning to understand. She didn't look at what the money was for. She looked at where it went, how it moved, and whether the path it took was honest. Those were two different things, and she'd learned long ago to separate them. Rask appeared in the accounting pool at irregular intervals, always after 9, always without announcement. He would stand at the end of her row of desks and watch her work. He never sat. He never asked her to stop. He would wait until she looked up, and then he would ask one question, and she would answer it. The Lakeshore Logistics account, Q4 variance. 42,000 high. Garvey inflated the fuel costs to absorb a payment he reclassified from a different account. I can show you the source files. She would show him. He would look at the source documents she'd laid out. Not her summary, the actual source, and he would nod once. He would leave. He never praised the work. He never told her she'd done well, but he kept coming back at odd hours, and every question he asked was answered with a number that was actually true. And Brynn began to understand that for this man, this was what mattered. The second month, she found something she hadn't been looking for. She'd been running a reconciliation on the import accounts when she noticed a pattern in the cash disbursements. Not fraud exactly, not Garvey's kind. Something newer, a series of small payments, just under the threshold that would flag automatically in the system, going to a numbered company she didn't recognize. The dates clustered around dates when Rask was off-site. She sat with it for 2 nights. On the third night, she put together a short memo, 4 paragraphs, the numbered company, the dates, the amount pattern, what she thought it indicated. She didn't leave it on a desk. She carried it upstairs and knocked on the door of Rask's office. He was at his desk. He looked up. "You should know about this," she said. She set the memo in front of him. He read it. His face didn't change while he read, but the quality of his stillness changed. There's a particular kind of stillness that comes from a person processing something dangerous, And it's different from regular stillness the same way a held breath is different from a regular one. He looked up. You came to me directly with this, he said. Yes. Not Tobias. I don't know Tobias well enough. You don't know me. No, she said, but you're the one paying me to tell you the truth. He was quiet for a moment. The numbered company is held by a man named Yates. He runs port operations on the east side. He said it the way he might say anything, matter-of-factly, as though port operations were a straightforward thing to run. He's been accessing my disbursement schedule. Someone inside has been feeding him the pattern. Yes, Brynn said, that's what the dates suggest. Rask stood up. He moved to the window. Toronto at midnight was an arrangement of lit rectangles and moving lights, ordinary and enormous and entirely indifferent. How long have you known? 3 days. Why didn't you come to me 3 days ago? She thought about it honestly. I wanted to be sure I was right before I said anything. He turned from the window. He looked at her in the way he sometimes looked at source documents, searching for the point where the numbers stopped making sense. He didn't find it. Don't sit on information again, he said. It wasn't a reprimand. It was a correction, the way you corrected an entry in the wrong column, not in this house. She met his eyes, understood. There was a particular evening in November, wet and sharp with the first real cold that would stay, when Brynn was working through the original construction accounts, and Rask came down and sat across from her, not at the end of the row, at the desk directly across from hers the way a colleague would, and watched her pencil move across the graph paper she still preferred for first-pass work. You do it by hand first, he said. I think better on paper. He leaned forward slightly. What is that? Cash flow reconstruction, 2021 to present. She turned it to face him, the real picture, not what Garvey filed, not what the 3 firms guessed, the actual movement. Rask looked at the page for a long time. It wasn't complicated. That was the thing. She'd stripped away all of Garvey's architectural cleverness, and what was left was simple. Money in, money out, where it came from, where it went. Clean columns, honest totals. The whole shape of the operation visible in a way it hadn't been in years. His hand moved toward the page the same way it had moved toward her first 1-page summary. Involuntary, like reaching for something warm when you've been cold for a long time and have forgotten what warm felt like. For 2 years, Rask said quietly, I didn't know what my own operation actually looked like. He touched the edge of the page. I knew what Garvey told me it looked like. Brynn said nothing. She waited. The firms gave me probabilities, he said. Best estimates. Ranges. He looked up. His grey eyes were tired in a way they usually weren't, not sleepy, the deeper kind. I haven't had a true number in 8 months. She thought about what it would mean, not to be able to trust the basic instrument of your world. She'd felt a smaller version of it at CRA when she'd handed in her audit and been told the numbers were correct, but the conclusion was inconvenient. The disorientation of knowing your math was right and being told it didn't matter. It's all there, she said. Numbers don't lie once you get past the person who dressed them up. Rask looked at her for a moment. You know what you're actually working for, he said. What this operation is. She folded her hands on the desk. I have a reasonable picture of it. And you're still here. You asked me to be accurate. I'm being accurate. She paused. What you do with accurate information is your business. That's always been the arrangement. He was quiet for a long time. The man who built those false ledgers, Rask said. I trusted him completely. He ate dinner at my house. He looked at the clean graph paper, and everything he showed me was constructed. Brynn thought about her supervisor at CRA, handing her the form to sign and explaining patiently why accuracy was sometimes beside the point. People build what they need you to see, she said. It doesn't mean numbers can't be honest. It means you have to go back far enough to find where they started. He looked at her. Something shifted in the flat grey eyes. Not warmth exactly, but the possibility of it, the way winter light sometimes catches a window and suggests what's coming on the other side. I balance the books for the wolf, Brynn said quietly, and I've had to make peace with knowing what the wolf does when he leaves the building. She held his gaze. I've decided I can. Rask didn't answer immediately. He looked at the clean graph paper between them, the true picture, finally, of what his empire actually was. Then he said, Yates is making a move tonight. She went very still. He has someone inside. I don't know who yet. Rask stood. I need you in the server room. The disbursement files. Find who's been feeding him the schedule. She was already pulling on her jacket. How long do I have? An hour, maybe less. She went. It took her 43 minutes. Not because it was easy. The trail was buried under 3 layers of access log edits, the kind of covering your tracks work that someone does when they think they're being clever. But the disbursement schedule had a timestamp architecture that the person hadn't thought to alter, because it didn't look like a vulnerability unless you understood how the system built its read history. Brynn understood. She'd built read history analyses at CRA for 6 years. She came out of the server room with a name printed on a single sheet of paper. She found Tobias in the hallway. She handed it to him without a word. Tobias looked at it. He made a call. What followed over the next 2 hours, Brynn didn't ask about and wasn't told. What she knew was that by 2 in the morning the building was quiet again, and Tobias came to the accounting pool with a look on his face that suggested he was not a man who impressed easily. He wants to see you, Tobias said. She went upstairs. Rask was at his desk. He looked the same as always, except that he was more tired, and one of his knuckles was split, and he wasn't pretending he didn't know she'd noticed. It's handled, he said. She nodded. You found it in 43 minutes. The access logs had a gap. It was visible once I knew what I was looking for. He looked at her for a long moment. You could have been on Yates's payroll. You've had access to everything from the start. Yes. Why aren't you? She thought about it seriously, because it was a serious question. Because I went back to the source documents, she said, and the source documents told me you were the one who wanted the truth. Yates wanted a specific answer. Those are different things. Rask was quiet. He opened a drawer. He took out a plain notepad. He wrote something on it and turned it to face her. It was a number, not weekly. She looked at it. That's not a contractor relationship, she said. No, he said, it's not. He held her gaze. I don't need a forensic firm. I need someone who goes back far enough to find where the numbers started. Someone who can't leave a broken ledger alone. A pause, the particular kind that cost him something. I need you to stay. Not as a temp. Not as a contractor. He said it plainly, the way he said things he meant. Stay. Brynn thought about everything she'd walked into 3 months ago. A temp placement, a receivables backlog, a stack of files that smelled like deliberate chaos. She thought about the single page she'd built at 5 in the morning and left on Suki's desk because she couldn't help herself. She reached across the desk and took the notepad. She uncapped her pencil. Beneath his number, she wrote one condition in her small, precise handwriting: full access. Always. Source documents, not summaries. She turned it back to face him. He read it. He nodded once. She took the notepad back. She drew a clean line under both entries, his and hers, and set it on the desk between them. Not a contract, not a threat. Just a true account of what was owed and what was offered, balanced to the penny. Outside, November rain pressed against the windows. The city below was doing what cities did at 2 in the morning, moving quietly, holding its shape, keeping its own books in ways that weren't always honest. I'll start on the port logistics accounts, Brynn said. Yates has been in those for 6 months. I want the real picture before you make your next move. Rask looked at the notepad on the desk, at the clean line she'd drawn under their arrangement. Something in his face had changed, not softened exactly. Settled, the way a building settles when the foundation is finally sound. 7 o'clock, he said. Come up to the office, not the pool. She stood. She picked up her jacket. I'll have the first pass done by then, she said. She went back downstairs to the accounting pool, unlocked her desk, and opened the port logistics file. The numbers waited there in their complicated tangle, hiding whatever they were hiding, patient and dishonest in the way that falsified numbers always were, right up until someone went back far enough to find where they started. She turned on the lamp. She took out her graph paper. She started at the beginning.